This next section will look at role-based access control. Now, role-based access control in Azure allows you to grant fine-grained access to what's known as the control plane. The control plane in Azure you can think of as the subscription and the objects itself. Here's another way of thinking about it. If I have a virtual machine in Azure, role-based access control allows me to define who can power on the virtual machine, power it off, delete it, or reconfigure it. Virtual machine permissions within the virtual machine itself governs who can access it or log directly onto it. So within Azure, this notion of role-based access control governs the Azure objects itself. And it's done at 3 levels. You have the subscription level, which allows you access to the overall subscription to create objects within the subscription, including creating resource groups. Now, resource groups have their own set of roles. So you can grant a role within a resource group. So for example, I want you to be able to stop a virtual machine. Well, I can do that at the subscription level, which means you can stop any virtual machine in my subscription. I can do it at the resource group level, which means you can stop only what's in this resource group, or the third level is at the resource level itself. So I can grant that role on a particular resource. Now, roles are varying, and they apply to particular types of objects. For example, some roles are specific to virtual machines. Some roles are specific to databases. Some roles are specific to storage accounts. It's up to you as the administrator to look at all these roles, kind of understand what they are. And again, this is available in the documentation, and figure out which roles are appropriate for the tasks that you're trying to configure. Within each of these areas, the other important fact to remember is that things are inherited. So if I grant you at the subscription level, that's inherited to all resource groups and all resources. Likewise, the resource group level is inherited with all resources within that individual resource group. Now, there are 3 basic roles that apply to everything. Owner, which means you can essentially do anything. Contributor, which means you can create and manage, but you cannot grant additional permissions. And then reader, which means you can look, but you can't touch. So reader is self-explanatory. Owner, you can do anything, including grant permissions. Contributor, you can create and manage, but not grant permissions. And then reader is you can look, but you can't touch. You can also create very custom roles. So you can create any combination or any type of role that you want. When you create a role, you're defining a list of what are known as actions. Here's a look at an example. This is a role owner. It simply says you can do, and look at the actions area, anything. So all actions. The asterisk represents all actions. Here's another example of a custom role. This is a contributor. You can delete, you can write, you can do anything except delete. You can't write permissions, and you can't elevate your access. So the authorization node, which is what covers permissions, you're not allowed to have access to. So you can define a role by using any combination of actions in the sense that you can grant, or not actions, which is in the sense that you can deny, to build the custom role that you want. Here's an example of a reader. Any resource, any scope, but you can simply read. And then you can look at this, in great detail using PowerShell. So there's a command called get Azure RM role definition, which will list all the roles and show you the details of the individual actions that role can perform. Now, creating a custom role, having done this a couple of times myself, does require doing a little bit of homework, because you've got to figure out what the actions are that you want to put in that role. And to a degree, it's a little bit of trial and error, but it also involves taking a pretty good hard look at the documentation for not just existing roles, but all the available actions. And again, you can go to the Azure documentation and see the list of every single action Azure supports, figure out those actions that you need, and then add those to a custom role. And again, speaking from experience, the best way to approach this is least privilege first. So you begin by adding only the minimum you think you need, test it, test it, test it. When you find something fails, add additional actions until you find just that perfect balance of what you're allowed to do.